Hello, it's Cried here, with the updated Glintstone Staff guide for Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. With 2 more staffs from the DLC, we have a total of 20 Glintstone Staffs now. Let's take a look at which staffs you should be running for your build, as there are quite a few options due to the nuances. Oh, and to add to the complexity, I'm also going to be talking about dual wielding staffs to give you the best advantage you can possibly get if you want to play a pure mage build. Before we embark on this journey, the major reason why so many staffs are relevant is because Glintstone staffs scale differently from normal weapons, with growth patterns that are front-loaded or back-loaded. In fact, there are 4 different scaling curves. What the heck does this all mean? It just means that, depending on the level of your intelligence, you're getting more spell power or less spell power per point of intelligence. That's why we need to cover a wide range of intelligence. First of all, let's start with the general options before talking about specific staff bonuses. And let's just get the early game staff out of the way, using only 60% of full upgrade, which is plus 6 for somber staffs and plus 15 for regular smithing stone staffs. Let's use 30 intelligence as an early enough stat investment. Here is the list. Notice that the meteorite staff is still plus 0 because it has a special property of not being able to get upgraded. So the performance of this staff is relative to the upgrade level you can afford for your weapon, and is indeed the best staff when unupgraded, right at the very beginning of the game. Anyways, with that out of the way, your best low intelligence option is the demi-human staff, the only staff on the list that uses the ultra front-loaded scaling graph. This is why you start to see it falling off already at the 40 intelligence mark, where the Academy's Glintstone staff is catching up. Anyways, I'll switch back to fully upgraded staffs now, but regardless of the upgrade level, 41 intelligence is where the Academy's Glintstone staff catches up. So if you're not planning on staying at low level, you can basically forget about the demi-human staff, as you would rather invest in something more worthwhile in the long run. Before we move on to higher intelligence levels, I do want to point out that 41 intelligence also happens to be where the Carian sorcery sword has the highest spell power. This is a thrusting sword that is able to cast spells using its heavy attack on your main hand, or replaces your main hand weapon's weapon art with spell casting while on your offhand. To learn more about it, refer to my thrusting sword video or my dedicated Carian sorcery sword video. There are 2 things I want to highlight though. This thrusting sword requires 19 dexterity, which you could have otherwise invested into more intelligence for your staff. So it is only fair to compare it to the Academy's Glintstone staff at 50 intelligence, since the staff doesn't have the dexterity requirement. This means that the Academy's Glintstone staff still has 13.5% more spell power over the sorcery sword at the same level of investment. The other thing I want to point out is due to how the spell power of items are scaled, and how intelligence only increases the magic attack portion of the sorcery sword. FromSoft did not tie the scaling of the spell power to physical spells. If you're confused, don't worry. All I'm saying is that there's a bit of an oversight, because investing in intelligence does not increase the damage you do with physical spells when casting with this sword. Instead, investing in strength and dexterity will increase the damage of physical spells, however little that might be. Look out for my pinned comment if you're from the future to see if this has been fixed. Alright, let's finally talk about higher intelligence investment levels before I add notes on the staffs that scale with Faith and Arcane. Let's start with 50 intelligence for the magic damage soft cap on weapons. Usually, you'll go higher for a spellcaster build, so this is mostly a consideration when you're running a hybrid build. The Academy's Glintstone staff is your best option, which also means that staffs like the Astrologer's staff and the Glintstone staff have no use at all, as they are always worse. At 60 intelligence, the Academy's Glintstone Staff still remains your best bet, as paying 50% extra FP cost with the Lusats is not worth a few extra points of spell power. If you're not too hard-pressed on upgrade materials for other weapons, the Academy's Glintstone Staff is the staff I suggest you to upgrade for your regular playthrough, as it uses regular smithing stones, while the other backloaded staffs we're covering real soon all use somber smithing stones so they don't share upgrade materials. The backloaded staffs I'm talking about are the Carian Regal, Lusats, and Azur's Glintstone Staff, which to some are an endless debate as irreconcilable as picking one of these guys in your earlier childhood years. Let's take a look at where they're actually good at. 68 intelligence is when the Carian Regal finally beats the Academy's Glintstone Staff, since 60 to 80 intelligence is where backloaded staffs scale best to. So at 70 intelligence, Carian Regal is pretty much the best staff you can afford. How come the Regal and not the Lusats? Let's use an argument that favors the Lusats Glintstone Staff. Let's say we have 70 intelligence and 17 mind, which is 105 FP. We have 10 more points to invest, which I invest into mind to get 158 FP. This is 50% more FP to pay for the extra cost of Lusats, which actually rounds the FP cost of the spell up, so it might not even be enough for the full 50%. On the other hand, we can invest 10 more points into intelligence instead, since we don't need the additional FP. We get the Regal Staff at 373 spell power, which is higher than the Lusats. And the reason why this example favors the Lusats is because the higher mind you have, the more stat points you need to make up for the 50% additional cost. Furthermore, FP restoration items restore a flat amount. It does, however, also mean that the Lusats always comes out on top when we consider the 10-second window of no FP cost with the Cerulean Hidden Tier though. While not really universally applicable for cheesing everything, it is nice to keep in mind. Moving on to AT intelligence, the debate is most definitely still between Lusats and Carian Regal, where Lusats has 10.7% more spell power at the cost of 50% more FP usage. This difference in spell power translates to a bit over 11% for the actual damage dealt, depending on the spell you cast, due to the defense formula of Elden Ring, with multi-hit spells like Stars of Ruin and Collapsing Star receiving a larger benefit. With a lot of people going for level 150 instead of 125 for the DLC, there's actually many more points available for mind investment, making Lusats better than it was. My personal suggestion is to start with the Carian Regal on your playthrough, as this staff is much more FP efficient, which means that you can ensure that you not only have enough vigor, but also plenty of HP pots. However, if you happen to specialize in a few spells that are already highly FP efficient, or FP is not an issue for you, then you can swap over to the Lusats. For example, in PvP, if the only spells you're casting are the very basic Carian Slicer or Swift Glintstone Shard, then yeah, sure, FP wouldn't be that big of an issue for you. But if you're running more expensive spells in PvE and find yourself allocating most of your flasks to FP pots, you might want to think about using the Carian Regal to be a lot more FP efficient. I'll leave the discretion up to you, but I just want to make it clear that the Lusats cost is very high compared to the benefit. And finally, we have the Azur's Glintstone Staff to cover. This staff has lower spell power than the Carian Regal and increases your FP cost by 20%. For that, you gain 40 Vdex or Virtual Dexterity. In Elden Ring, investing into Dexterity speeds up the initial casting animation of your spell. The amount sped up depends on the spell itself, and the maximum benefit is capped at 70 Dexterity. The Azur's Glintstone Staff increases your Vdex by 40 because it increases your cast speed without actually giving you Dexterity investment. so you'll end up somewhere around 50 or so Vdex out of the maximum 70. On a side note, the Radagon icon grants 30 Vdex, while the new beloved Stardust maxes out your Vdex to 70, while making you take 30% more damage. The Azur's Glintstone Staff is mostly relevant for PvP, as the bit of extra speed tends to not outweigh the additional cost for PvE. Oh, and this staff works dual-wielded even on your offhand, unlike the Lusats, since the Lusats damage bonus is directly baked into its extra spell power. It means that you can have the Azur's Glintstone Staff equipped on your offhand for extra cast speed while paying the 20% additional FP cost even when you're casting incantations. A quick look at 99 intelligence shows that things are pretty much the same as 80 intelligence, except with even higher numbers. How about if you're one of those level 500 plus players who don't care about staying at certain rune levels? Well, when everything is maxed out, the Prince of Death staff has a higher spell power than even the Lusats, which actually happens a bit earlier, even at 80 intelligence and 80 faith. There is one exception though, which is using the Scholar's Armament, which only scales to the intelligence portion of your spell power, and not the faith portion that Prince of Death gets from investing into faith. If you're concerned about this spell in particular, I've also made a cheat sheet here. Alright, I think this is a perfect segue into our hybrid staffs, starting with the 3 int faith scaling ones. We immediately knock out the Gelmir Glintstone Staff, as this staff is only good for its passive when dual wielding. At the 43 point soft cap for the Gelmir and Staff of Great Beyond, this staff barely matches the Great Beyond, even on lava spells. So definitely take the Staff of Great Beyond instead, which is also the only staff in game that can cast incantations in addition to sorceries. For a full deep dive on this staff, refer to my Mage of Great Beyond video. Next, as the Prince of Death staff is backloaded, you definitely want to take full advantage of its growth in the 60 to 80 point area, where it will grow to greatly surpass the Staff of Great Beyond in terms of spell power. Otherwise, even for the sorceries with high faith requirements, you might as well invest just enough faith for the cost, and dump the rest into intelligence to run the Carian Regal for much more spell power. Talking about faith investment, let's take a look at Staff of the Guilty, which is a staff that boosts the damage of Thorn's sorceries by 20% and only scales to faith. Overall, this is a pretty bad main staff that doesn't even beat the Prince of Death when having high faith and low intelligence. The reason why I'm still presenting a few points of intelligence is because spells have intelligence requirements. Also, the Thorn sorceries require only a bit of faith investment, so it is easier to just invest into intelligence with the minimum faith cost. This also grants you much more sorcery scaling, so this staff is mostly just for dual wielding for the 20% Thorn's damage bonus. Talking about Thorn sorceries, there are 2 ways to maximize their efficiency. The first is going for maximum damage with intelligence investment. The second way is to use arcane scaling staffs to increase their bleed buildup. At lower levels of intelligence and arcane, the Albinauric staff has a much higher spell power than the Maternal staff. But that doesn't put the Maternal staff out of the game, as the 2 staffs use different arcane buildup curves, which you basically have no accurate access to without data mining. The Albinauric staff uses the really crappy green curve that only increases bleed buildup by 15% at the 45 arcane status soft cap. On the other hand, the Maternal staff uses the much more common red curve, which increases bleed buildup by a whole 75%. This is 52% more bleed buildup when compared to the Albinauric staff, which you are trading away 30% spell power for, so it can be a worth it trade-off when bleed is your main objective. Also, the Maternal staff is a backloaded staff, so it actually performs really well when you have 80 intelligence and arcane, tying with the Lusats on spell power without the additional cost, while also scaling bleed sorceries with arcane. This is yet another great option for the high rune level players. Finally, let us discuss a bit about staff bonuses and dual wielding, which I will cover as simply as possible. Staffs like the Carian Glintstone Staff and Carian Glintblade Staff are actually fairly good choices over the general staff, depending on your intelligence level. The higher the percent shown on the right, the better the specialized staff is over the general staff when casting the specific sorceries. The left side will show you the amount of damage you would expect to lose if you're casting a spell not boosted by the specific staff versus the general staff. But this is just for picking one single staff. Many staffs have bonuses to certain types of sorceries, and this can be stacked twice. So if you're casting Knight's Comet with 2 Staffs of Loss held, like in my Knight Wielder build, you do get the 30% bonus to Knight Sorceries twice, which turns it into a 69% damage bonus thanks to calculation being multiplicative. There is one thing to note though, which is if you're dual wielding staffs, you want to be casting with a staff that has higher sorcery scaling, and your offhand staff that's giving the bonus doesn't even need to be upgraded, since Lusats bonus is directly baked into the sorcery scaling of the staff itself. Offhanding an additional Lusats staff does not grant you any bonus spell power, and instead will only make you spend 50% more FP cost, due to the FP cost being treated as a bonus. Therefore, you should always have at most one Lusats staff, and if you're holding it, you should be casting with it. Similarly, for arcane staffs like the Albinauric or the Maternal staff, holding a second one does not increase the status buildup even further, because the bonus status buildup is due to casting with a staff that scales to arcane. Here is a brief comparison for comparing dual wielding the same staff to holding one general staff plus one staff with spell bonus. The higher the percent is, the better it is to dual wield 2 of the same staff. Let's use the notable Staff of Loss once again. Dual wielding Staff of Loss here is about 18% stronger than casting with the Carian Regal while having a Staff of Loss on your offhand to give you the Night Sorcery bonus. I linked my full sheet down below in the description of this video alongside Cryptid's Catalyst Calculator as a resource in case you need more info. Like and subscribe. If you want to support my work, please consider buying my fantasy novel or donating to my Patreon down below. With a book purchase, you can also request a topic from me. Krite, signing out.